Hi, I'm Jennifer Potter, Executive Director of Be Well Texas. Too many people are struggling alone these days, and alcohol and drug deaths are increasing. We started Be Well Texas to offer high-quality, science-based addiction treatment and recovery services anywhere, virtually or in person. In many cases, there is no cost for treatment or medications if you don't have insurance. Really. Welcome to Be Well Texas. We're glad you're here. Visit bewelltexas.org.
Hello and welcome to March 2 of the pod presented by Eternal Roofing. This is season 2, episode number 27. We're going to place realistic expectations on Cats athletics and tell you what that means in just a minute. I'm your host, producer, formerly band member of catfans.com, and a man who turns heel, not named John Cena, Cory Hogue, the non-FBS insider at Dave Cable's Texas Football. Find me on your favorite social media channel at Cory Hogue Sports. That's all one word. It's CoryHogue Sports. By the way, saw somebody today who got a job at TCU, spells his name wrong. Put an E in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. The knowledge of this show is provided by the creator and manager of sports of SHSU. That's all one word. On Twitter and Instagram, the chief operating officer of the Cat Fund, proud Bearcat alum, Ben Sorrells. And Ben, let's just jump right into it because I changed the opening of the show right about 3:57.
Which is about on par for the show.
I mean, how would we have it any other way? Let's talk. We were going to open with a kind of a dreary topic about what the last week of Bearcat athletics until the softball team actually played pretty well last night. However, tomorrow night, hey, look, there's Ben too. Tomorrow night, before the men's basketball game at 5:15 on Thursday, there will be a tailgate outside Johnson Coliseum where they will have free food and free beer for an hour and 15 minutes before tip-off. What could go wrong, Ben?
I mean, I'm glad to see them bring this back. It's something they haven't done in a year or two, something when I was a student they did every year from what I remember, and maybe even a year or two after that. So it's good to see them bring this back. And it used to be like a chili cook-off contest, and they did that for a year or two, which was a lot of fun. So good to see them bring it back. And I think one of the games that they did it for when I was a student was the SFA game back in like 2018 or 2019. And there were like 3,500 people there that night. Obviously, SFA plays a part in that. The team was really good that year, but I think the tailgate played a part in it too. So hopefully you can get some people to turn out to Johnson Coliseum tomorrow night as the final homestand of the year gets going.
It's a big game. It is UTEP. But, I mean, the free food, I get that. But we've seen at times a beer giveaway go awry, Ben.
Yeah, they do keep it pretty under control at Sam Houston. They typically do this at the football tailgates. I think it's like 1 or 2 beverages per student. I'm sure that there's some people that find a way around that. But from what I've seen and when these events have happened, things have been pretty under control so far.
Hi, I'm the guy who finds a way around that. Let me just give you a brief story. When I was stationed in Iraq, we took one of I didn't get to come home in my first deployment for 2 weeks. They didn't have enough time or whatever it was. So I went to Qatar for like 3 days. That was my trip home, and that was in place of my trip home. Anyway, during that time, we were allowed 2-3 beers a day, right? Each night at the whatever the heck little beer shop they had on the base. And dude, I could get 12 tickets pretty easy.
2 or 3 turns into 12 or 13 pretty quick.
It really does. So, I mean, you got to watch out for those. There are people out there like me. And again, hide your wives, hide your kids, hide your daughters, hide everyone else, hide your puppies. Everybody get away from me. But there are people out there like me.
Yes, especially between the ages of 18 and 22, I'm sure.
That is right at the age I prefer to be thought of.
Yeah.
I'm a 22 or 23-year-old mentally.
At heart, yeah.
Yeah, that was like half my age ago, though.
Right. Dating yourself.
Oh, man. Yeah, I know. Man, those dates go by fast, too. Enough of that stuff. Let's hear a word from our friends over at Eternal Roofing before we get into trying to figure out how we're going to measure success for the Bearcats now that we've moved up a level.
Eternal Roofing and General Contracting is your choice for integrity work in the Texas Hill Country. Taylor Andrus and crew provide experienced quality roofing services with a mission of roofing with faith, serving with integrity, and sheltering homes in the spirit of stewardship. Don't just take our word for it. Here's what satisfied customer Pamela Allen had to say about Eternal Roofing. They did a great job on our patio roof, came out quick for a quote. The quote was very reasonable, and they started and finished work well and quickly. Not a bad thing to say about Eternal Roofing. Give Eternal Roofing a call today at area code 830-251-5673 or area code 936-215-8539, or you can email them taylor@eternalroofingtx.com.
Well, this show is off to a rousing start. Not only did I change the opening at the last minute, I'm leaving headlines up as we go to the ad, and it's just lovely, isn't it?
Yep. But I mean, that's kind of the way we go here.
That's why we
We're gonna
have
make
all
it
these
work.
we have all these get better weeks, and I get worse. How does that happen?
Maybe we just need
Hey.
to stop taking weeks off.
Ooh, I don't get better with time, man. I do not age well. Okay. I had a crazy idea the other day, Ben, and I was talking to someone. This was a D2 person. And I was like, you know what I don't understand is why athletic directors don't place benchmarks on their coaches that if they achieve, write it into the contract that if you achieve X amount of wins overall each year, you add automatically 1 year to your contract and get a raise, 5, 10%, whatever. I think 10% would be fair if you meet the standard that we want you to achieve. And so I started thinking about it. We started talking how many wins overall would be a great thing. And, you know, like men's basketball, 20 wins, women's basketball, right? 20 wins, softball, baseball, 35 wins is a pretty good season.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, that's a good season. But that's Division II. That's Lone Star Conference. And it got me thinking, and when I posed this to you the other day, Ben, you immediately pointed out that you can't do overall for the Bearcats.
No, for pretty much all sports, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't. However, I think we might have to have a couple or at least one that we do.
Right.
So here's the question. We're going to pretend here that Bobby has decided that I am the genius contract idea guy, and that he's going to set a standard for each program based off X number of wins, and that will add a year and add money each year. And by the way, if you do it 2 consecutive years, you get 2 more years added on to that contract. So it pays off to keep going. Now, you could also, if you don't meet that standard, I don't care how many years you have left, we're going to have a discussion.
Yeah, I was going to ask too. There's good things going up. What about going the other way? If you don't meet XYZ for X amount of years, is your contract terminated? Is that part of Cory's genius plan too?
We will have a discussion, and and in that discussion would be what happened, right? I mean, look, sometimes going in, you might have an off year. Okay. Maybe it's a recruiting cycle. Maybe who knows maybe injuries hit too much that year, right? I mean, there's lots of things. I know one team lost a guy to a mental illness this year, right? Like, I mean, there's one team in the Lone Star Conference is entering the tournament with like maybe 8 scholarship players left, right? Like, he's had a really bad year.
And that's what men's basketball has been like this year, and the women have seen a little bit of it too.
Yeah, so we started talking. And it's not fair necessarily to do overall record. I think we're in agreement right now that using a Conference USA record is a better way to measure success for all but one program.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially, pointing out basketball, for example, to be able to fund your budget for the year, you have to go play a lot of bye games. Like for this year, you're playing at Pitt, Nevada, Indiana, Baylor, that kind of stuff. And even baseball, as much success as they've had over the past 10, 20 years, their record against A&M, Texas, Houston, LSU, those kind of teams, no matter how good they are, it's still not that great of a record. And so using the conference record is typically a better way to look at things, and a better way to grade these teams from kind of an overall perspective.
Except football. I think football, you need to have a set state. Now we're going to disagree on this when we get over into the next segment here, and we start actually putting the number on each program, what we should expect to see. I don't know. I mean, look, 6 games is a bowl game. Is 6-6 a good enough record for me to add another year to a contract? I'm not 100% sure. I think we need to go overall wins, and I mean, how many conference games are you going to have in that too, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come to mind for football. At least is for example, this year's schedule, I think it's a completely different gauntlet than last year's schedule, and comparing those two, I don't know is necessarily fair. UNLV, Texas, and Oregon State is not Hawaii, Texas State, Rice kind of thing. What we had last year, it's a pretty significant step up. And so I think there can be some fluctuation in the non-conference schedule. You're always going to have a bye game in there. But this year you have 2 bye games, and UNLV is really good too. So I think that comes to mind. And then we'll get into expectations a little bit later. But I think a bowl win could kind of be the expectation going into next year. Maybe it doesn't warrant a contract, but maybe if you don't meet that for 2 years, then it's time to have a discussion, something like that. So a bowl win or bowl appearance might not be contract extension worthy, but not making it multiple years in a row, I think, could be something that warrants a conversation of whatever that might look like, terminating the contract, whatever that might be.
I think it's about time we start moving into these programs and what our expectations then should be for each program. But before we do that, I want to let you know that we are a podcast on the Republic of Football Network and an extension of Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on various social media channels, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at March 2 the Pod. It's all one word. March 2 the Pod. And before we get into our next segment where we start putting these stringent standards on these programs, let's hear another word from our friends at Eternal Roofing.
Eternal Roofing only uses the finest materials in the roofing business while providing an exceptional warranty. Why do they use certain teat products? Because they complement any appearance, provide exceptional and reliable strength, and are known for their enduring performance. Here's what Shane Sosa had to say about Eternal Roofing. Taylor and his team are amongst the highest level of professionals. They care about their...
That did not work. Let's try that again.
Eternal Roofing only uses the finest materials in the roofing business while providing an exceptional warranty. Why do they use certain teat products? Because they complement any appearance, provide exceptional and reliable strength, and are known for their enduring performance. Here's what Shane Sosa had to say about Eternal Roofing. Taylor and his team are amongst the highest level of professionals. They care about their customers and go above and beyond just doing the job. Give Eternal Roofing a call today at area code 830-251-5673 or area code 936-215-8539 or email Taylor at eternalroofingtx.com.
Huge thank you to Taylor Andrus and his team over at Eternal Roofing as apparently StreamYard put in this new thing this week, Ben, when I clicked in there. And it's called Scenes. And I've been playing with this a little bit all day, trying to figure out how to do this, how this kind of works. I just failed when I was playing with that one. I was like, well, let me see how the video's playing. Surely it won't. Yeah, it did.
Sounds about right. I mean, that's our pre-production meeting right there.
Yeah, no, man, you really do need a good producer.
We've got a great one.
I don't know about that. Hey, all right. So we are discussing today, and we should have had this discussion. Let's be honest. This should have been done a while ago, right? Like we should have done this coming into Conference USA. So I think it's important that we go back and set these expectations for success. They're not what they used to be. That's just the fact of the matter, Ben.
Yeah, and I think it's starting to kind of come to people's attention with a lot of the spring sports really struggling right now. The football success kind of masked maybe the lack of success in volleyball in the fall, but in the spring, I mean, you're kind of reliant on basketball to carry you, and that hasn't happened. And I think basketball maybe masked some of the downfalls of the program in the spring last year with some other sports because men's basketball was so good. It got so much attention. But I think it's time to kind of talk about what the expectations are for these programs, because Conference USA in football, I think a lot of people know it's probably them in the MAC. They're at the bottom of the FBS. But when it comes to Conference USA basketball, volleyball, softball, baseball, I mean, these are legitimate conferences that are in the top 8 to 10 out of 30 to 35 leagues across the country. And it's difficult to compete. And I think it's probably time to talk about some of those expectations.
Yeah. Boy, the producer's on point here. Right as you finish, I put us back up to where it should have been the whole time. Starting that, let's look at football. You mentioned the football schedule earlier. Well, here is a football matrix provided by Conference USA. And listen, there are 12 teams in Conference USA in 2025.
Yep.
Obviously, you're not going to play all of them in football every year. There's a rotation. I'm guessing they're going to probably keep it about 8 conference games a year.
That's my thought too, especially with UTEP leaving after this year. You go back down to 11 teams. I imagine they'll probably stay at 8 games, and you play 8 of the 10 other teams, kind of just a round number.
All right, so we've got that number of 8 conference games. Now, you do have to schedule your money games. Texas, a great one to schedule, right? Going to Hawaii, that was part of the home and home. That is not going to be cheap.
Or easy. I mean, even if Hawaii's not very good, it's hard to play on the island.
You bring UNLV home.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, after you started at Western Kentucky.
And then you've got Oregon State there in the middle.
Oregon State is in there. You got Delaware in there now, the conference. Yes. Okay. So here's what I think. Well, before we get into what Cory thinks, because we all know Cory's a hater. Ben, what would you put, not putting this upcoming schedule, not every non-conference schedule is going to be this rough,
Right.
but what would be the number of wins if Ben Sorrells was AD that he would say that right there gets you a guaranteed another year and raise on your contract?
Yeah, I think it would be 8 for me, and I think a lot of people are going to have their expectations set to where the expectation is to have 10 wins per year now, just because of what the team did this last year. But when you look at the funding that Sam Houston has, the facility transition that they're in the middle of, they're still new to the FBS. I don't think 10 wins can be the standard, and I honestly don't think it's going to be something you obtain every year. But I think an 8-win season is something that should be able to be rewarded. It means you're probably in the top 3, maybe 4 in conference play. You're probably competing for a Conference USA title. That means you probably go 2-2 in the non-conference and 6-2 in the Conference USA play. So I think probably 8 wins is where I would set it at.
Yeah, you might be a little tougher than I am. Joe Chase agrees with you. He says 8 is reasonable. Jason Plockett, talking about the 2025 schedule, says if Sam can split the first 4, we'll be good. Feel good about where the Cats are headed.
Right.
You win 2 of 3 because I don't think you're beating Texas. You win 2 of 3. WKU, Hawaii, UNLV. Yeah, no, you are feeling pretty good about where you're standing right there.
Yeah.
I think there are 8 conference games. You can't tell a coach you're going to have to win conference every single year.
Right.
I think you're going to need to be right up in that upper third of conference every single year. So let's say conference alone, you should get bowl eligibility 6 wins.
Yeah, like I said, 6-2.
Yeah. What do you expect from a typical non-conference schedule? You're going to have this year, there's it's 1 money game or 2 money games because you're going to Oregon State too, and you had that extra game that you could put into the schedule.
But yeah, not in there.
It's not in there, but you had it that you could. You got 2
Right.
money games on that non-conference. That is tough. I'm going to say we're both agreeing on 8. Us, Joe Chase, we're going 8 wins for football is a reasonable expectation. And let me tell you something. If Phil Longo gets 8 wins next year, I might even add him another year on the contract and a little more raise because that would be very impressive.
It would be really impressive just because of the turnover that's come through. And this was going to be a tough year, even if Casey Keeler stayed, because this is the year that you had the 10 guys that were on the championship team fall off the roster. And I think the leadership aspect was going to be a big question coming into this year anyway. I think the talent was going to be fine. But you just lost so much leadership over this offseason, even if Keeler was going to be here. So, yeah, if he gets to 8 wins, that would be extremely impressive, especially considering the non-conference schedule that they have in front of them this year.
Yeah, and also remember, it has been a complete staff turnover.
Yep.
Almost 100%.
Minus Merkins, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, so we've got football, we believe 8 wins. I'm going right now based off 12 teams in the conference. So you play each team twice in a lot of these sports. Baseball, you play them a series of 3. Softball, a series of 3. That's kind of how I've figured this out. So men's and women's basketball, 22 conference games. We have already said that only football is an overall wins number. I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 22 Conference USA games, what's that number that Ben Sorrells says that earns you an extra year and a little bit of a raise?
Yeah, and it's 22 games, but I don't know if they're going to end up playing 22 because that's just a huge conference schedule. I feel like it'll sit 18 to 20. That's my guess, but we'll just run with 22 just for the.
Well, it's more looking at it from a percentage point of view, right?
Yeah.
Like we're looking at this like if there's 22 games, what percentage of these are you going to win? And then you just take that percentage down to 20 or 18 or whatever they actually end up with.
Yeah, I would say for the men's side, probably 15, a 15-7 record, or a top 2 finish, because I know Conference USA can be an absolute logjam, and the winner or the second place team could have 7 losses, kind of thing. We're seeing it this year. The winning team's probably going to have 5 or 6 losses in I think it's an 18 game schedule. It is so. I would say 15-7 or a top 2 finish in the regular season, or you win the conference tournament. If you can do any of those 3, I think it would warrant an extension.
So you're given options.
Right.
See, I'm not so nice. I also see a trend with you. 8 wins in football, which we both agreed on, especially considering you got money games. That's 66% of the games that they win. For men's basketball, if they win 68% of the games, they get 15 wins out of 22. So 68% is where Ben sets it and says that's a good number.
Yeah, that or a top 2 finish, or you win the conference tournament.
Yeah, you're way too nice. You're way too nice. You need, let me see. No, that's too many. I'm doing math now on a calculator. I think you need to win 17 of 22 to get that extra year.
See, on the men's side, I just feel like that's extremely tough, because this is the 8th or 9th ranked league out of, what is it, 33 leagues, I think it is. I mean,
yeah, but we're
tough.
also talking about me giving you money and another year to your contract.
Okay, and then
right?
on the flip side, if they don't meet that in their 3-4 years, are they done?
No.
If they end up with 14, an average of 14 wins a year or something like that.
No, okay. Here's how Cory would work it. Each contract would be a yearly thing anyway, unless you added on those years. But let's say you don't meet the standard to automatically kick in an extra year. That does not mean you're gone by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
That means that we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss it. For example, let's take the men's basketball team this year, since we're talking basketball. Let's take the women's basketball team. Let's talk about each one of those for just a second. Men's basketball. You've had a lot of injuries. You've had a lot of things go wrong. You had a game last Saturday's game was inexcusable, and Mudge took ownership of that, and I really appreciated that he did. That kind of stuff right there matters a lot to me. Women's basketball, am I seeing improvement, right? Like, I want to know that there's hope. That's what I'm looking for. Do I believe if I bring you back that next year's team is going to be better than what happened this year? Or at least the pieces will be there.
Right. Yeah, and I was going to say, since we started with the men's side, obviously no contract extension this year, but I think you have to feel pretty safe going into next year. And I know he is, but if you're Chris Mudge, because you go 13-3 last year, you win the regular season, fall short in the conference tournament, but you kind of hit that mark. Like you said, 13-3 would meet your standard on a 22 game kind of schedule. So he would be completely fine. And this year's just kind of a down year, and we'll see what next year looks like.
So I want to give another option, since you gave 3 options.
Yeah.
Winning the conference tournament, that's not going to automatically get you an A, because there could be some things behind that, right? But if you win the conference tournament, I'll think about it. However, if you get in the first 4 and you win one of those first 4 games, I'll give it, because that's an NCAA tournament victory plus the conference tournament victory.
See, I think I included it in there because it is something that the school hasn't had in nearly 15 years now. And the women have never done it. The men haven't done it in almost 15 years. And so if you're the one that can get it done, I want to give you another year, because it's something that haven't seen it.
How many bids is the league going to get, though?
It's going to be a one-bid league on both the men's and women's side.
So, I mean, you're basically giving them the same standard, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, and hey, look, Joe Chase says if we're going to give standards, I think both teams should be in the top 4 consistently. And you're definitely not out of the ballpark. We've got them having to stay right there at the top, probably 2 or 3 of the conference, in my opinion.
On the men's side, especially. The women's side, I think, is a little different. If we're looking at a 22-game schedule, I think an extension would probably be 13 or 14 for me, because it is a program that historically has just not been very good, but has shown it can get there at times. And if you could get it to, I would say maybe 14 wins for the women. If they could get 14-8, I think it would warrant it, just because it's a program that historically has not succeeded very well, is not as resourced as some of the other teams in Conference USA, especially on the women's side, which has some really good teams too. So I think on the women's side, I'd go 14 wins, and then on the men's 17. And I would also add on the women's side a top 2 finish, or maybe a top 3 finish, and then a NCAA tournament appearance.
The standard is the standard.
Yeah, I mean,
it is for me. I can't see here's the thing for me, and this is just this probably says more about me and who I am as a person and my true core beliefs. I cannot have 2 different sets of standards. I'm going to have one set for both basketball coaches.
I agree, but to an extent. I mean, you look at a school like Vanderbilt, you're not going to hold their baseball program to the same measure that the football program is. It's 2 very different things, and 2 programs that historically have done 2 very different things. And so I think that's kind of where the difference comes in. Not that they're as drastic as those 2 kind of programs like Vanderbilt, but I don't think you hold Vanderbilt football to the same standard you hold Vanderbilt baseball too. And that's kind of where I come from. But I think you're going to be consistently let down and firing your coach every 2 years if that's the standard you have.
See, that's where I think the disconnect is coming. You think I'm going to be ready to fire him? That's not what this is. Like, okay, let's take the women's basketball for example. Do I expect them to hit the 17 win mark? No. Do I understand that it's got challenges it's building? Yes. But the standard is the standard. That's what, if you hit that, that's what it's going to be.
And I'd be okay with that as long as they can, if they have a 13-14 win year, which for that program is good, they continue to get opportunities. Then I think I could be okay with that.
Oh yeah. Look, I mean, I'm not in a change coach mood right now for the women's basketball program anyway. Right? Like I haven't quite reached that point myself with that. And Jason Plotkin says some of the women's sports in the league are very top heavy versus having a quality depth. You mentioned the same thing, and they're very top heavy, but I mean, I'm not. If the women's basketball team, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, if you're showing improvement, if I can look at this and go, I see you, we're here communicating well, and you're on the right track. Right now, listen, this is where the AD Cory comes in a little different than maybe others too, because I am going to be, what do you need from me to get there? And I'm going to write those down and see if I can't make that happen as well, because it takes all of us to make each program good.
Yeah, and I think another point to bring up too, and why we're talking about this, is because of the lack of success that there's been, and with a lot of these programs, especially this year, moving up, and the only time you will get those extensions in our fantasy land is when they hit those marks, and they haven't hit those marks, and it's going to be very hard to. They're very challenging goals. These are goals that would have been much more attainable in the Southland or the WAC.
The goals would have been higher. By the way, my numbers would have been higher.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the disappointment comes in, but I also think we need to have some sort of realistic expectation that we set the standard at whatever it is, 15, 16, 17 wins, but we're not going to hit that standard as much in Conference USA. It's just not something that's going to happen, at least for a little while, just because the standard in this league is a lot higher than the the standard from Conference US or from the WAC in Southland.
Joe Chase wants to know, is that a minor league baseball hat? Yes, Joe, this is the Montgomery Bacon Biscuits specialty night hat. I think they still use it. I've had this a few years ago, but welcome, Joe, into the Cory land of hats. I've got quite a few, and it continues to grow. Okay, we've got through football. We got through men's and women's basketball. We're going to move through the next few, maybe a little quicker. I'm going to group them together because, again, maybe you will have different standards because you're a little more empathetic, AD, obviously, than I am, Ben. But I am going to group these together so the win total I give goes for both baseball and softball. How are you going to play? 30. By the way, we're going off of 33 conference games, which is a lot.
Yeah, and gosh, it's so hard to. This is another one for me where it's hard to set the same number for both programs, just because both of them historically have done very different things. But starting with baseball, I think you need to be. I think a contract extension would be warranted for a top 2 finish or 26 wins.
See, yeah. I have a problem with putting it at the top of the league.
See,
because each year, man, like maybe this year the league is tremendous. Maybe next year it's not as good.
And I think partially why I'm saying that is in volleyball, you have Western Kentucky, who's a top 25 team every year. In women's basketball, you have Middle Tennessee, who is going to go probably 18-0, 17-1 every year. They almost beat Tennessee this year. And in baseball, you're playing DBU, who's a top 15 team almost every year. So if you could get in that top 2 and be first or second alongside them, I think that warrants some sort of reward, in my opinion.
And look, this is perfectly reasonable because this is a fantasy land, but trying to honestly, here's what we're doing. We're trying to give our fans a number, something that says, okay, this is doing well, because we are seeing things not going like they have been for years. By the way, Joe Chase and I can be friends. He also has a collection of minor league logos. Mud Hens are his favorite. I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite logo or hat right now when it comes to that. Chris Gilstrap over on Facebook said women's basketball has been average or terrible for a long time, even in the Southland. Justice is 97 and 99 in 7 years. And we kind of got into that last week a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's where the different expectations for me probably come in. I mean, it's hard for the women to reach something they have never really obtained in their entire history outside of maybe the 1 year they went to the NIT, I think in the 2010s. So to hold them to the standard that the men's basketball team that's been to multiple tournaments, that's won the regular season multiple times in the past 5 years, has either won or been top 2 in the regular season 3 different times. It's hard for me to hold them to the same standard.
Well, I don't know if you understand this, but I do have a tiny, tiny little bitty social media presence. And sometimes I get people who disagree with me when I start talking about the standard. And so this is why, this is one of the things we were saying. And look, my buddy was saying the same things you are, right? Like he's saying, well, the women, I would maybe put a little lower. I'm putting the standard is this is what it is, right? Like, and not to say but we need to be moving in that direction. And if at the end of this year, and Chris Gilstrap points out again, they've had 4 straight losing seasons. You're 100% right. There needs to be, and we did discuss this a little bit last week with women's basketball. This needs to be a discussion time. We're getting into the area where we need to talk about the future. Are we on the right path? But that's what I'm talking about. If you win 17 games, I don't have to question we're on the right path. I already know we are.
Yeah, and I think that's why we do have questions, is because we have these expectations. Even the 14 wins I said for women's basketball, clearly not there, and they might not even get halfway there. And that's why I said last week, if they don't win 2 of the last 3 and probably win a game in the tournament, I think you definitely can start to ask the hard questions and see if you need to make a move with the program.
And those are things we're going to talk about next week, by the way, heading into the tournament.
Yeah, and then looking at the softball side of things too, I know I said, 26-7 for baseball. I think you look at 21, 22 wins and a top 3 finish for softball, in my opinion. So you're looking at 22-11, 21-12 kind of thing. I think if you could hit that kind of goal, you're definitely worthy of an extension, because it's like a stretch goal. If you can hit that, I think it's worthy of an extension based on what this program's done.
You actually said 26 wins for baseball?
26-7, yeah.
Jesus Christ, man. You have been pretty consistent right around that 66, 68, 70% range. And then boom, 26, man, 25 is 75%. You're expecting them to win 3 out of every 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the standard that this program has set. And that's why I put the number there. This is, I mean, a program that's been to multiple regionals, especially in the past 2 decades. And even recently, I'm trying to pull up some records here, but 22-8 in 2023, you went 24-6. In 2016, you went 24-6 again in 2018. You went 21-9 in 2022. So it's a very difficult league. So maybe back it down 1 win to like a 25-8. But this program's done it multiple times in the past at the Southland level. And that's kind of the expectation that people have for this program, because a 24-6 record, that's an 80% win percentage. And I'm bumping it down to 25, 26 wins. I feel like that's pretty reasonable for the expectation that this program has kind of set over the past 2 decades.
See, I operate. I think sometimes, and I think you're giving us a really good view of what a lot of the Cats fans believe too, and how they feel, right? Because you're in it, you've been in it, you've lived it for so long. I've been on the outside watching. I come in a little more like, I expect this. Every program I want to win. A little more militaristic. Go figure. From an Army vet, I'm a little militaristic. But I'm setting that at 25 wins. If there's 33 games, I want you to go 25-8. That's 75% winning percentage. I think that is. I think that's attainable. I think it's hard. I think it's really, really hard. And I don't want – see, here's what I don't want. I don't want to make something that they go, oh, well, that's easy. No, we don't – we want – here at Sam Houston, you want to have success. You just need – and you want a high standard, right? Like, we don't want to lower the standard of what it should be. We just want to be reasonable about our high standard.
And it's a standard that's probably not going to be reached every year. Which is okay, but it's something every 2-3 years I think needs to be reached. Like baseball in the 2010s, it was a regional every 2 out of 3 every other year. I think if you can do it 1 out of 3 years now, I think that would be a really good success just because of where this league is. So yeah, they need to be kind of a stretch goal. Absolutely. I think 25, 26 wins is a stretch, but it's definitely something that this program should be able to obtain probably every 3 years.
Now, let's see what the people say. One element not mentioned is scholarships, how the House it will impact baseball, softball, how many scholarships as other league schools. That is definitely something that Jason Plotkin said. He said that on YouTube. And you know what? We are going to need to discuss that, but that is not a topic we have time for today.
Well, and I'll hit on it just very briefly. I think the reason why it's such a big topic in baseball is because you have the opportunity to go from 11.7 to I think it's 35 is going to be the cap, and that is a massive range. In basketball, you go from 13 to 15. Okay, it's +2, but it's the last 2 guys on your bench that are never going to play. In football, you can go from 85 to 100. You add 15, but those 15 guys are never really going to play. In baseball, going from 11.7 to 35, when you consistently have 15, 20 guys that play, I mean, it's a huge impact. So it's going to be
Oh,
something
it's a huge financial impact. Huge, massive.
yeah. So it's going to be something to watch. And I know, but
Guess what that means?
we're going to talk about it. And
Yeah, well, we're going to find out how important it is.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. And Chris, by the way, Chris Gilstrap, he agrees with you. He even said, I agree with, I'll put it up so Ben, I want you to go back. I'm going to want you to screenshot this and I'll give you a countdown so that you'll know when to screenshot it. Cause I want to make sure we're smiling.
There we go.
I agree with Ben. Ready? Ben, 3, 2, 1.
I took a picture of it. Yep.
There you go. All right. So you can frame it, put it up there so your wife can see it every single day that Ben is right and Chris agrees with him. Chris said 6 of the last 10 years, baseball had 20 plus wins in conference. The bar is set high, should remain high. I like I said, I think Ben is just more proof that Ben is speaking what the fans want and what the fans are doing. And Cory's over here going, here's what I would do. Because I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think baseball specifically, the expectation shifts very slightly from every other year to 2 out of 3 years to this has to be done probably 1 out of every 3 years at least. It's a big step up in competition, but this program should be able to do it 1 out of every 3 years is my thought.
All right. Women's soccer, 11 games.
Yeah. It's interesting because soccer was a program that struggled mightily for a long time. And Sonia Carvello has kind of revamped things. And I wouldn't say we're towards the top of the conference now, but we're in the mix. You made the semifinal last year. We're right around 500 this year. If we're at 11 games, I would say probably 8 wins. You could maybe talk me into 7 is where I would give a contract extension. Yeah. 7
you
or 8
think I'm
wins.
going to try to talk you down?
No.
Have you ever heard me? I can't believe I was trying to talk you lower in baseball.
Yeah, well, that's where I have a really high expectation just because of just what this program is. But yeah, I'll say 8 just because I need to go back and look at the standings. But we went 5-4 this year, and we're in sole possession of 4th place. So. And that was 9 games. You add in 2 more. I think 8 wins is definitely something that would be contract extension worthy. 8-3.
Yeah, I go with it too. That's right at 73%.
Hey, well, then how do you factor in ties? What if you don't lose?
That's why. Yeah. Okay.
What if you go 6-0-5? Like you don't lose a game, but you tie 5 and win 6. Maybe a points percentage or something like that.
Yes. Let's do a points thing. Right. So if I expect 8 wins, I expect 24 points.
Yeah, if you're going on a 3-point standard. So
you go a 3-point standard, let's say 24 good points. So we're saying 24
73%. Yeah.
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 That way we are giving factor into the draw.
Yeah. And so if you were to go 6-0-5, that's 23 points. So you're 1 point off there. So you would need to probably go 7-0-4. Kind of thing if you weren't to have a loss kind of thing.
Okay.
Works for me.
Works for me too. What about volleyball? 22 conference games under that kind of we'll say 22 games.
Yeah, this is another program where, I mean, they've had success pretty recently, but the last few years, last year the WAC, first 2 years of Conference USA have been tough. And so if you're looking at a 22 win or 22 game schedule, for contract extension, I would probably need 16, I think, 16-6. And I think you have to factor in that Western Kentucky is probably going to be 2 losses every year. I mean, and I hate to have that mindset, but they're a top 20, top 25 team every year that does not lose in conference play. So if you could go 16-4 against the rest of the league, I think that would be contract extension worthy.
Any idea what number I have for games?
20.
17, man, just like the basketball.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm consistent. You can hate me, and a lot of times I hate myself. Okay, and it's normal. It's all okay. We can all hate me. It's fine. What I'm saying is I'm consistent, though. At least I'm always that way.
Yeah, and I mean I'm pretty close with it. And I think our men's basketball program and volleyball programs are pretty similar, at least in the success they had up until 2 or 3 years ago, where they were teams that were always competing in conference play, winning division titles, that kind of thing. And so I think 16 wins is probably where I would set them. I bumped them down one just because of what WKU is in volleyball.
Well, guess what, Ben? We're going to have to – we've been talking about program standards, and now we're going to hear a word from our friends at Eternal Roofing, and then we're going to come back and tell you why you are so important to the success in reaching these standards that we're setting here today.
Eternal Roofing is locally owned and dedicated to giving back to the community by supporting local organizations and charities. They are also the winner of Next Door's Neighborhood Faves for 2 consecutive years. And as you know, if you've listened to this podcast, Eternal Roofing is your choice for Christmas lights. They provide premium lights tailored to fit your home, season-long maintenance, and hassle-free removal. Kyle Tatum said, "They're very professional and great quality, on time and clean, and really made me feel like they cared for me and my home." Give Eternal Roofing a call today at area code 830-251-5673 or area code 936-215-8539, or you can email Taylor at eternalroofingtx.com.
I could tell we're starting to run a little long today because but I tell you, I have an interested member of my family waiting on me over here.
Oh, I thought you were laughing at what I sent you.
Yeah, she said she's ready to hurry this up. She is definitely ready to hurry this up. What you sent me too. We do not need to talk about that on the show. Cory gets in enough trouble as is. You know what? We have been talking today about standards and setting these standards, but the people who's listening, the fans, you're going to have to help too. And you can help because it takes a lot of money to reach the standard wins that we're talking about here. And there's a way you can do that while helping these athletes too. Ben, fill them in on how they can do that.
Yeah, cat-fund.com right there. As our great producer put up, as little as $10 a month, you can support these athletes and get a lot of great benefits in return. Our insider info is starting to crank back up on there with spring ball starting to move closer and some other things happening on campus. Had a big update on where Sam Houston was with revenue sharing in there. I was able to find a way into catfans.com today and posted another football staff update today. I think we're all kind of banned from Cat Fans right now. Now the site's down. So it's not just Cory, but definitely want to sign up, become a member today, support these athletes because we need it to be able to compete at this level in Conference USA and help support these athletes and get something fun out of it also.
Now you all know how I felt.
Yeah.
You all know because now you're all banned too with me. You know what? That is the effect I had on the entire site.
Yeah, it just keeps crashing.
It just crashed. Yeah.
Put your name in it somewhere and it's done.
Ooh, dude, that is really a bad idea. Hey, speaking of bad ideas, spring football games are starting to go away, Ben. They are starting to go the heck away. Hey, Joe, real quick on Cat Fund, Joe Chase has a question. Can people sign up at games?
Yeah, I mean, feel free to let them know the link, have them sign up. Typically at all football games, we have a tailgate set up with our QR code there. I know most of us are at basketball games of some kind. Some of us travel on the road. I know I'll be at maybe at some road baseball games this year. I'll be at 1 or 2 road football games this year. So I can definitely sign up. And if there's any questions, you can go to cat-fund.com and point people there.
Need to, something to think about because I'm obviously a marketing genius. Look at me. It's prediction is having that, having that as part of come find us, come sign up at the Cat Fund tailgate, have maybe a banner, something for them to see so they can find their way to you and get more people signed up.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing. And you run into some people and it definitely works. And these meet and greet events that we've done help. We did our raffle for the Keep the Cats campaign that we did back at the end of December, early January. So those items and autograph stuff are being shipped out to people. So yeah, a lot of good stuff going on and different ways to get involved.
Really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. Okay. Teams are dropping spring football games. A lot of them are. Texas. When Texas and Oklahoma, these teams start dropping it. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and debate whether Texas and Oklahoma should have a spring game. If you're worried about some other team watching video of your spring game and taking your players, then what in the world is wrong with you? Right? Like, you're Texas, you're Oklahoma, you're a power team.
Yeah.
But when we start talking group of 5 teams and lower, right? We all know I'm in there from FCS and below. I go deep into the football world, right? I don't know if I should have said deep like that twice, but I did. That does happen. There is tampering all the time, and there's nothing you can necessarily do about tampering. But you don't also need to advertise your players' abilities out there on a spring game with video. I mean, so that brings up the question, should the Cats hold a spring football game?
Personally, I don't think so for a couple of reasons. One is you've only really held one in the last 5 years or so. And the reason it was held last year was because the football auction was the same day and so many people were coming out for it. And I think it was a good way to get people just kind of on campus for the day and make sure they come to the auction, make it an all-day event kind of thing. So for the past 5 years or so, there's really only been one spring game held, and I think part of it was due to the auction being the same day. The second reason being, like what you just said, you don't want someone showing up at the game that you don't know who they are, tampering, whatever it might be, putting stuff on film. Obviously, our stuff has never really been televised, but it's open to the public. You never know who shows up. So Sam Houston, we're that kind of school where, I mean, you can't pay for anyone you want, like a Texas or an Oklahoma or Nebraska, who I think is not doing a spring game too. So not that kind of program. Number 3 is from an operations standpoint, you're right in the middle of baseball and softball season. And we just really don't have the operations to kind of put on a full-fledged spring game that's going to be televised. It's going to have tailgating. That's going to have event staff. And that's kind of a difficult thing to do from an operations standpoint. And number 4, I mean, you did it last year and had 300-400 people show up. It's not an event that, like a big school where you're going to have 35,000 people show up, or even like Bauer Stadium, you're going to have 15,000 people show up and pack the stadium. And especially this year too, with construction, you've only got one side of the stadium and you're not even going to fill up half of that. So I think
do a fan fest. Like, I mean, there's so many things you can do to put in place there to get. I think what I want you to do. I think what I want to see, and look, I'm not. We'll get into Cory's thoughts in a minute. We all know that's a dangerous area, but I do want to see something that connects the players with the community, the program with the community.
Yeah, no, for sure, and like a fan fest thing, or even the auction, like we did last year, having a meet and greet with players, just having them show up to that, I think is something you can look at. And another thing too is like you hold 3 or 4 scrimmages in a spring practice, nothing really changes for what you do from like a football standpoint. Some fans are like, we need a spring game so I can go watch the team play, and they need to put on a whole game for me, and it needs to look like a game. And that's just not really the case in spring ball. It's a very different kind of thing. And so a lot of the times these spring games are really just scrimmages. Last year's spring game was just a bunch of situational football. Like, we're going to drill the red zone. We're going to work the 2-minute drill. It's not necessarily a spring game, and that doesn't get people very excited typically.
No, and it's not even an injury thing, because anytime you line up in pads out there on the football field, you can have injuries. That's not what it is. I think it's different depending on the levels. All right, so how many, if you're NAIA or D2, D3, you've got somebody who's FCS level, though you don't have a ton of those on your roster, right? You usually don't. Maybe you sit those guys out. If you do, sit them down the spring, you could still have your spring game, because Coaches tell me at those levels all the time, there's a lot of value for them in those games.
Yeah.
I can understand them keeping that. But when you start talking about group of 5, you start talking about FCS and above, no.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. And the other thing, a coach I was talking to this morning told me that cutting any tape, like they get tape of the practice, the kid gets it, they put that out there. All of a sudden, teams are tampering. It gets on the huddle. Teams are tampering, and you're going to see teams try to find any way possible to keep tape of their players off of the internet now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one thing to have one-on-one practice reps tape, and it's another thing to have live 11-on-11 tape. You don't want to put a ton of that 11-on-11 tape out there for guys to have.
No, even
see.
in generic offense stuff,
Yeah.
but no, I think for a group of 5 school, an event with the community to where maybe they get to play certain games on the football field. Chris Gilstrap says teams are tampering anyway. Oh, I know they are, but you don't want to make it easier for them to get there.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to give them the film and everything. Because let's look at, honestly, what's happening right now. We see it at the draft. FCS guys, the NFL is saying, nah, because why didn't you go play at the bigger school? Could you just not? Are you afraid? I mean, seriously, Jalix Hunt last year, it's not that nobody gave him a chance to play the edge, right? Like Tristan McCollum, the McCollum brothers, like, come on, man. Like, we need to stop. That kind of stuff is going to be really bad for football if that's what the NFL starts doing.
Yeah. Well, and kind of a segue to a thought that just came to my head, and I won't be there for it, but the pro day for Sam Houston is March 17th. So just under 2 weeks away from the pro day. And I think there's 10 guys going through it. And a couple of guys that I think legitimately have a shot to maybe be like a mini camp invite or a UFL or CFL kind of guy. So intrigued to kind of see how things look there at pro day.
Will they be wearing green?
I don't know.
I would recommend it that day.
So they can blend into the grass?
No, it's March 17th.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you don't get any of those stupid celebration dates away from me.
The scouts
I can forget anniversaries, but not celebration dates like St. Patrick's Day.
The scouts that will be there, maybe we'll have a couple of adult beverages and think a little higher of our players than they would have without those adult beverages.
Jeez, how much you spiking? Hey, we have gone a little bit long today than we should have. But hey, I thought great conversation today. I think these are things we want to talk about. And by the way, this is what we're going to be doing more and more. We are going to have these conversation pieces. And so, like what Jason mentioned earlier about the way the house will impact baseball, softball, and things like that, those are things that honestly we need to get into that. I think that kind of stuff is more important for us to talk about than just kind of recapping, previewing the athletic department and games coming up. They can do that kind of stuff. We need to dig into some of these issues that fans want to know about. So that's what we're doing. Was there a reference to March 2 earlier on the podcast? We're already run late. The hell with it, right, Jason? All right, Ben. Cory, the producer, also runs the social page, so I'm sorry about that as well. I was tweeting out emojis this weekend on some of the scores.
Yeah.
I'm honest. There was, and you know what? I need to get better. I'm not a very good social media person. I'm not good on it. I'm not good at thinking about it, of creativity with it. I'm just not. But I need to work on that. That is one of the weak areas I got to work on. And I should be on March 2nd. There should be posts from March to the pod on this. Also on Tripod's birthday. We should always have that.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
And one thing I want us to do again, we're going to start doing it probably starting year 3, is just each year we're going to go through at least one segment talking about how we got to our name.
Yep. Because it's been a while since we touched on it.
It has been since the very first episode.
I know.
Yeah. So there it is. I have got to get better at that. There was not the reference, but happy birthday to the general, to the man, Sam Houston, back on March 2nd, also known as Texas Independence Day, because without him, there would be no independence for Texas. God bless General Sam Houston.
Yep.
And God bless you and each and
For
every one of
making it
you
this far, yeah.
for making it this far through the show. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us today. Listen, it's going to be a big weekend for the basketball teams. A lot of sports going on. Let's give them something to go out on, and maybe we have a better weekend than we did last weekend.
Yeah, eat 'em up, Cats, and let's please get a baseball win tonight to kick off a good weekend coming up.
Please.